The most bizarre king in Joseon. Of the 27 kings of Joseon, only 2 were ever overthrown in a coup: Gwanghwaegon and Yeonsangun. The 2 cases are very different in character. Gwanghwaegon's overthrow is still debated today. Scholars remain divided over whether the Injo coup was a legitimate uprising or simply a political power grab. There are those who argue that Gwanghwaegon's neutral foreign policy and his attention to the welfare of ordinary people deserve reappraisal. Yeonsangun is different. Almost no historian defends his deposition. The reason is the subject of today's video. Today is not about political purges or oppression. It is about the acts recorded directly in the Yeonsangun Ilgi, acts that even the people of the time found difficult to believe. The Yeonsangun Ilgi is part of the Joseon royal annals. Because it documents a deposed king, it was named a diary rather than annals. Its content and structure, however, are identical to the other annals. Everything we cover today is recorded fact from that document. The birth of Heungcheongmangcheong. 10,000 entertainers from across the country. Among the Korean words still in everyday use today are some that originated in the Joseon period. One of them is Heungcheongmangcheong, meaning to spend extravagantly and recklessly. The man behind this word is Yeonsangun. In 1505, Yeonsangun issued a command to the entire country. Every district in every province was to maintain a troupe of unpyeong, entertainers specializing in song and dance. The number recruited across the country reached 10,000. To put that figure in perspective, the total population of Heungcheong at the time was roughly 100,000. He had conscripted the equivalent of 1 in 10 of the entire capital's population as entertainers. From among them, the most beautiful were selected and brought into the palace, where they were given the name Heungcheong. But it did not stop there. Among the Heungcheong themselves, those who had shared the king's bed were classified as Cheongwa Heungcheong, celestial grade, while the others were Jigwa Heungcheong, earthly grade. A rank system based on royal sexual favor had been established among palace entertainers. The cost of feeding, dressing, and maintaining all these women was enormous. The Yeonsangun Ilgi records that the cost of a single outfit for a Heungcheong was equivalent to what an ordinary family could live on for several months. The treasury of the royal household office ran dry. Additional taxes were levied on the people. To supply the Heungcheong, 2 new government posts were created, the Chehongsa and the Chechongsa, and dispatched throughout the country. Their mission was to find beautiful women and fine horses in each province and present them to the palace. Provincial administrators trembled at the mere rumor that a Chehongsa was coming. Failure to meet the quota meant punishment. The saying spread, "The Heungcheong are ruining the country." The word Heungcheongmangcheong was born here, not meaning that the Heungcheong themselves were ruined, but that the country was ruined because of them. This word, still in use 500 years later, is Yeonsangun's oldest surviving mark on the Korean language. The Royal Academy and the temple become entertainment venues. 2 sacred sites destroyed. To understand the shock of what Yeonsangun did, you first need to know what Sungkyunkwan was in Joseon. It was not simply a school. In Joseon, a state built on Confucian principles, Sungkyunkwan was the home of the shrine to Confucius, the training ground for the highest officials in the country, and the spiritual center of the entire political order. To be a student, there was among the most prestigious positions in Joseon society. It was where scholars preparing for the civil examinations gathered, the intellectual and moral heart of the dynasty. Yeonsangun had the spirit tablets of Confucius removed from Sungkyunkwan and relocated to a remote mountain hermitage. He expelled all the students. Then he invited shamanist performers into the building and had them conduct their rituals there. The sacred center of Confucian Joseon became a shaman stage. What made this more than mere eccentricity was that it constituted an act of mockery against the governing philosophy of the entire dynasty. The second target was Wangaksa Temple, a Buddhist temple personally rebuilt by King Sejo, one of the largest temples in Hanyang at the time. It stood on the site of what is today Tapgol Park in the Yongno district of Seoul, the site of the 10-story marble pagoda, National Treasure No. 2. Yeonsangun converted the temple into an entertainment house for his entertainers. The sacred center of Confucianism and the sacred center of Buddhism both spiritual pillars of Joseon, fell simultaneously. At Gyeonghwaeru Pavilion in Gyeongbokgung Palace, Yeonsangun mobilized over 1,300 people to construct an artificial mountain in the pond, Mance Mountain, and had a palace structure called Bongnagang built on it. He had a dragon-carved boat large enough for hundreds of people made and set afloat on the pond. Records indicate that the number of laborers mobilized for this construction reached over 500,000. The work continued even in years of famine. In the palace garden, he established a falconry compound and had hawks, dogs, exotic birds, and strange beasts captured from all 8 provinces and brought in to be kept in cages. The royal palace had become a menagerie. The Yeonsangun Ilgi records that dozens of people were deployed daily just to care for these animals. Acts of depravity without precedent. Before the Gapjasawa of 1504, Yeonsangun came to learn the full truth of his mother, deposed Queen Yun's death. Queen Yun had been expelled from the palace not long after Yeonsangun's birth on charges of jealousy and misconduct, and had later been put to death with poison. Yeonsangun had grown up not knowing precisely how his mother had died. When he learned the truth during his reign, he began a campaign of extreme retribution against everyone he held responsible. Among his targets were 2 of King Seongjong's royal consorts, Royal Consort Aom and Royal Consort Jong, whom he judged to have been involved in his mother's death. On a night in 1504, Yeonsangun had both women bound and dragged into the palace courtyard in the middle of the night. He personally beat and trampled them to death with a club. The scene is recorded directly in the Yeonsangun Ilgi. It did not end there. Yeonsangun summoned his half-brothers to the scene of the killing. Prince Anyang, the son of royal consort Aom, and Prince Bongan, the son of royal consort Jong. He ordered them to beat their own mothers with their own hands. According to the Yeonsangun Ilgi, Prince Anyang struck blindly in the darkness without knowing who the victim was, while Prince Bongan realized what was happening and could not bring himself to raise his hand. Even after the deaths of the consorts, Yeonsangun's rage was not satisfied. He ordered additional punishment carried out on the corpses. Having the bodies torn apart and cast into the river, or grinding the bones to powder and scattering them in the wind, the punishment known as shui gol piofung. It was not enough to kill the living. He desecrated the dead as well. There was no precedent for this in Joseon's history. The Yeonsangun Ilgi also contains another deeply disturbing record, a scandal involving the wife of his uncle, Lady Park, wife of Prince Wolsun, in effect the king's aunt. The record contains the claim that Yeonsangun assaulted her, and it is said that Lady Park took her own life as a consequence. This account is based on circumstantial records and cannot be stated as confirmed historical fact, but the fact that the story was widely circulating throughout the court at the time is itself documented. Bizarre punishments and a taste for cruelty. Yeonsangun applied genuine creativity to the domain of punishment as well. The Yeonsangun Ilgi records punishments that had no precedent in the existing Joseon legal system. Cheonjong, driving a spike through the palm of a subject's hand, was a punishment he personally devised and ordered. Beyond this, punishments such as apseul, crushing the knees under heavy stone, porak, burning the body with heated iron, and water torture performed while the victim stood on their head all appeared or expanded under Yeonsangun's reign. The dead were no safer from his anger than the living. He had the tomb of Han Myung-ho opened and the corpse beheaded. The punishment of posthumous dismemberment, known as pugwanjamsi. Han Myung-ho was a figure from Yeonsangun's grandfather's generation who had long been dead. Posthumous dismemberment was an extremely rare punishment even in Joseon, yet Yeonsangun ordered it on multiple occasions. Kim Jong-jeok was subjected to the same treatment. The story of the eunuch Kim Sejo is among the most shocking records of all. Kim Sejo was one of Yeonsangun's closest personal attendants. One day drunk, Kim Sejo submitted a remonstrance to Yeonsangun. Among all the kings before him, none had brought such disorder and tyranny. At these words, Yeonsangun immediately ordered his execution, but the manner was horrifying. According to the Yeonsangun Ilgi, Yeonsangun shot arrows into Kim Seo's legs, cut out his tongue, opened his abdomen, and killed him personally. What followed was even stranger. Yeonsangun banned the Chinese character Chio from use anywhere in Joseon. because it appeared in the dead man's name. The seasonal term Cheoseo was to be renamed Joseon. The ceremonial dance Cheoyongmu was renamed Pengduemu. The language of an entire country was changed because of one man's name. Violation of the order meant punishment. No other king in all of Joseon's history issued such a command. He erased from the entire country a single written character from the name of the man he had killed. The Sineonpae, tablets and the ban on Hangul, silencing speech, burning letters. The institutional mechanism at the heart of Joseon's system of checks on royal power was the three offices, the Saheonbu, Saganwan, and Heungcheongmangcheong. Their official function was to point out the king's errors and submit remonstrance. Through the reign of King Jungjong, these offices had functioned actively, and even the king found it difficult to simply disregard them. From the beginning of his reign, Yeonsangun treated the three offices as enemies. He classified any criticism of himself as nyongsang, an act of contempt for the ruler, and punished it as such. After 2 rounds of political purges, the Muosawa and the Gapshasawa had sent hundreds of officials to their deaths or into exile. No one remained in the court who would speak directly to Yeonsangun. But Yeonsangun did not stop there. He required the remaining officials to wear a wooden tablet around their necks. The Sineonpae, the tablet of cautious speech. Carved into the wood were these words: "The mouth is the gate of disaster. The tongue is the blade that cuts the body." The king had formally ordered his subjects to wear around their necks a reminder to keep silent. Nothing like this object had ever existed in the history of Joseon. The officials who wore it were required to maintain absolute silence before the king. Expressing an opinion, let alone a criticism, had become a dangerous act. Still, criticism found another way. Anonymous placards written in Hangul began appearing on walls throughout Heungcheong, denouncing Yeonsangun's misconduct. Because Hangul was easy to learn and accessible to ordinary people who could not read Chinese characters, it was difficult to identify the authors. Yeonsangun was furious. His response was to eliminate Hangul itself. According to the Yeonsangun Ilgi, Yeonsangun banned the teaching of Hangul entirely and ordered all books written in the script to be burned. A system of collective punishment was put in place. Anyone who knew Hangul and failed to report it would be punished along with their neighbors. The writing system created by King Sejo for the benefit of his people was banned by Sejong's own great-great-grandson. The ban was lifted only when Yeonsangun was deposed in the Jungjong Coup. Artistic obsession in the performance of madness. A king who designed and performed. Among Yeonsangun's recorded behaviors are some that are distinct from pure violence or extravagance, acts that carry a strange quality of artistic obsession. In a certain sense, their strangeness makes them more unsettling than the rest. First, an obsession with clothing design. According to the Yeonsangun Ilgi, Yeonsangun personally directed the design of the garments worn by the palace women in the Heungcheong, specifying colors, patterns, and materials, and demanding that anything not to his satisfaction be remade. He did not stop at simply making things elaborate. He devised specific styles himself and forced others to wear them. The clothing of officials was not exempt. No other Joseon king is on record as having personally designed the clothing of his subjects. The materials demanded, rare silks, gold, and silver embellishment, were enormously expensive, and the process drained the national treasury. Second, an obsession with performance. Yeonsangun had the Cheoyong mask, the ceremonial mask used in traditional court dance, which he renamed the Pengdu, decorated personally with gold, silver, and jewels. When drunk, he would put on the mask himself and parade through Gyeongbokgung Palace with hundreds of Heungcheong playing music behind him. The Yeonsangun Ilgi records that he performed in this way in front of the Queen Dowager's residence, dancing and taunting. And there is one further peculiar record about these masked performances. It is recorded that during them, Yeonsangun sometimes delivered acting so moving or so deranged that the watching officials in Heungcheong were moved to tears. A tyrant in a mask of gold and jewels, dancing like a jester, weeping, and his audience weeping with him. Whether those were tears of genuine emotion or of fear, the record does not say. Third, an obsession with controlling language. This connects to Issue 5's Hangul ban. Yeonsangun used language itself as a tool of control, the ban on the character Chio being the most striking example. And when Hangul placards appeared criticizing him, he banned the language itself. Anyone who knew Hangul and reported it would be rewarded. Anyone who knew it and said nothing would be punished along with their neighbors. The impulse to control thought by controlling language finds parallels in the methods of far later totalitarian regimes, though no such framework existed in 15th century Joseon. Yeonsangun arrived at the same logic independently: tyrant and artist, performer and censor. Yeonsangun remains the most psychologically complex and most disturbing figure in the history of Joseon's monarchy. Conclusion: the Jungjong coup and his last words. On the night of September 1506, the officials finally moved. Forces led by Bak Wonjong, Xiong Huyan, and Yu Sunjong raised troops. Yeonsangun had not seen it coming at all. The Yeonsangun Ilgi records that on the very night the coup began, Yeonsangun was holding a banquet at Cheongdeok Palace. By dawn on September 2nd, the palace had been taken. Yeonsangun was deposed and reduced to the rank of gun, prince. He received no posthumous royal title. He was not recognized as a legitimate king. That is why the record of his reign is not called the Yeonsangun Siluk, Annals, but the Yeonsangun Ilgi, Diary. Yeonsangun was exiled to Gyeodong Island in Gangwon. The man who had commanded thousands of Heungcheong and held banquets at Gyeonghoru just months before was left alone in a small island exile. He died 2 months later. He was 31 years old, 2 months after his deposition. There are suspicions of poisoning, but they have not been confirmed. His last words were recorded in the Yeonsangun Ilgi by the officials stationed at Gyeodong, who reported them to King Jungjong. There were no other particular words at the time of death. He only said he wanted to see Sinsi. Sinsi, his queen, Lady Sin of Gyeocheong, his legitimate consort. Yeonsangun is recorded in Joseon's history for every manner of depravity and tyranny, yet multiple records attest that he and his queen were genuinely close. Lady Sin was known for her virtue and composure. Even during the bloodshed of the Gapja Sawa, she had defied Yeonsangun to protect people, which speaks to her courage. At the end, it was her he wanted to see. At the end of all the records of depravity and tyranny, what remained was one sentence: a husband longing for his wife. That was the last human moment history permitted Yeonsangun.